When you're interpreting, the important thing is to try to be able to give back the speech as naturally as possible, as if it were your own. You're trying to be the speaker, to convey the speaker's message in the best way you can in your language and your culture. When you're taking notes for consecutive, it's very important that the notes help you and do not hinder you. If the notes get in your way, then that's a bad thing. One other thing about notes is that sometimes too many notes can be a bad thing, because when you understand something you desperately want to write it down, but when you come back to your notes you find it more difficult to read it back. And when I say read it back, I don't mean read it, because the whole point is to just use your notes to remind you of what the message that the speaker was trying to put across was, and you have to try and convey it in the best way you can in your own language. So you must never be tied down, unless you're talking about details, to the exact word that you've written down on the page. Sometimes when you're listening to a speech in another language, you might not think of the version in your own language immediately, so you have to do the quickest thing and write down the word in Spanish or Italian or whatever the original is. When you come back to it, you can only hope that you'll be able to convey it in English. When I write my notes, I try to make sure that I write in very big print so that I will be able to read it. I would try to look at the audience, try not to look at the notes too much, and try to be able to move the pages in a way which will allow it to flow. The most important thing about my notes is the pattern on the page, which is something we were taught when I was trained, which is to try to keep it in a diagonal. So the subject is at the left-hand side of the page, the verb or what's happening is going on in the middle of the page, and the details are down the right-hand side of the page, but always in a diagonal from the top left-hand corner down to the right-hand. And the other important thing is to divide it out so that you divide ideas, you divide completely new ideas off with 2 lines rather than 1, and you make sure that the details don't get in the way of the argument, so the details are always listed vertically on the side here. You're very welcome to look at my notes, but you have to understand that no notes are perfect. On the day you just do your best. You tend to write too much, you tend to write out words in full or nearly in full, and that's not always useful. But on the other hand, it's not always useful to have signs or symbols, because you might not always remember what those symbols are, and you might not remember them. However, you can see here that I have the details on the right-hand side, as I said, vertically. I have the beginning of the idea, the middle of the idea, and the end in a diagonal pattern. And that's what I try to do throughout. You will also see that I might not have more than half a sentence on one page, and that's my method. Some people can write an awful lot on one page and still convey it and still be able to look at the audience. But the most important thing is to be able to convey it in a lively way and not give the impression that you're having to decipher something. We're both interpreters. We work every day, but mostly in the booth, although my colleague does a lot of consecutive as well. We very nobly volunteered to do a consecutive for you to show you how it can or cannot be done. It's rather a torture for us, but we hope that you find it interesting and educational and that you enjoy it. Thank you.
Me gustaría poder añadir algo, pero es que lo ha dicho también, que no puedo por menos que decir que me asocio a todo lo que ha dicho.